Hi, everyone, and welcome to Able Cine's Creative Forces. I'm Gabriel Mays. I'm the rental manager in Burbank, California here for Able Cine. And today we've got three special guests. You may have heard of the Netflix show Last Chance U that's been a big hit. And so we've got three very talented people here with us today that we're going to talk to about their roles in the show and kind of the creative look of the show. So today we've got the DP Terry Zumalt, the first AC Devin Keebler, and also their cam gimbal operator David Newton. So throughout the show, there's a chat feature here on YouTube on the side. Feel free to list any chats there, any comments or questions you may have in there, and then we'll get to those throughout the show. We definitely want to make this an interactive experience. So anyways, let's start with introducing the guests that we've got. So we'll start with Terry Zumalt. So Terry, if you just want to tell us a little bit about your background and more about yourself.
Hey, Gabe. Yeah, my name's Terry Zumalt. I grew up in the Midwest in Missouri and went to Columbia College, Chicago, and I graduated there with a concentration of cinematography, and then made my way to Los Angeles, and been out here about 12 years working in the business, shooting freelance, and then also spent plenty of time as a electrician, lighting technician on all kinds of sets, from commercials to TV shows to features. I have, I learned a lot doing that, so that's something I always revert back to. And then from there, my friend Gabe Pate actually got offered the job for Last Chance U season 1 and 2. He was the DP, and he asked me to come out and be his B cam operator. And then, the show took off, and from there, and then season 3, he decided to, pursue other projects, and they asked me to take over, and I've been the DP now for 3 seasons of football, and we just finished up a basketball season as well.
Cool. And then Devin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your background?
Hi, Devin Keebler. I'm the first AC on Last Chance U. Went to Valencia Community College in Orlando, Florida. Got an AS there. When I was 21, moved to LA. Started working on a rental house for about a year. Freelanced around, and then eventually went just full freelance after going part-time. Eventually met Gabe Pate, and one day he asked me to go on an adventure to Mississippi, which was Last Chance U. I met Terry on some previous projects when I was doing TV and music videos with Gabe as an operator. We've been doing it ever since.
And David, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, so my name is David Newton. I live in the Midwest. I got into video production and kind of wanted to keep pursuing that. Living in the Midwest, you kind of have to do it all yourself, which a lot of people know, owner-operator style, and kind of just bounced around, part-time jobs, low-budget music videos, weddings for a short time in my life. And Terry has always kind of thrown me a bone. We went to high school together in the Midwest before he moved, and always, he would hear about shows coming through the Midwest or a commercial spot, whether it was AC, camera, or grip. And, if I could be lucky enough to get on that show, I would, through his recommendation, and actually ended up on quite a few shows. So when he took over Last Chance U on season 3, he called me, and that's kind of how I ended up there.
Thanks for explaining a little bit about your background. So a lot of you that are watching may have heard about Last Chance U. It just launched its 5th season in July on Netflix. So it's a pretty long-running show, and it's got a good brand behind it now. Why don't we go ahead and let's take a look at season 5's trailer that is out currently on Netflix. So if we can cue that up and get that playing, that would be great. And so then we can dive a little bit more into the show. But let's get the audience a little bit up to speed if they're not familiar with Last Chance U.
Touchdown! The defending state and national champion.
Nobody likes Laney. We the bad kids, the scrappy ones.
We're local East Bay.
play with a chip on our shoulder, gonna punch you in the dang mouth.
Oakland has gone on vacation over the last 10 years.
A lot of folks don't see themselves in the new Oakland because they don't see opportunity.
Put that up! Put that up!
Now 40 years coaching football.
I think he woke up pissing fire.
When I tell you to shut up, it better stop.
Why are you talking when he's talking?
Coach B was the man, real talk. He really kept brothers off the street. He was a father figure.
This dude want to win everything.
Oh, damn!
If the game is the hustle, I'm putting my money on Beam. Beam gonna be Beam every day.
Y'all gonna be my age one day. Look, I'm in great.
Laney College is the tough grind.
There aren't scholarships, there aren't dorms.
I wake up at 5:30, drive 2 hours, start class, practice, come home, go to sleep, and do it all over again.
They're coming from nothing.
I got some guys that didn't eat for 2 days.
I can do this myself. I don't need no handouts.
You got kids having kids.
Chill over here, okay?
This is not what your family needs from you right now, is it? They have the weight of the world sometimes on their shoulders. Our job is to believe in them so they can believe in themselves. You can do it. You have value. You are important.
Baby, come on! Be great!
We on a whole nother level now.
Wow, as you can see, the show is a documentary show, but is definitely shot in a very cinematic way. So I'm really curious, guys, if you could explain to me like what Last Chance U is to you and kind of how it's evolved from season 1 all the way to season 5. And then I know that you guys just actually wrapped shooting a basketball season. So if you want to talk a little bit about the show and like I said, how it's evolved from the beginning and what it really is.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's kind of taken on a life of its own at this point. I think Greg Whiteley, the creator director, I don't think when season 1 came around and they went down to Mississippi, I don't think they actually understood exactly what it was. Obviously it was about a junior college football team program and Coach Buddy, who's, a personality, but until we got down there and just got our feet wet and just started mingling with that team, we realized that there were so many more stories, and it became way bigger than just a sports doc, which I think is what it now is kind of known as. It's much more than football. Yes, it's a football documentary, but it's really about the stories of the players and the coaches and what they go through, just trying to get through it, just trying to make it, trying to get to that next level, and what they have to go through every day just to get it done. And it's pretty incredible what a lot of these young people have to go through. And I think we've just evolved on that each season. Of course, geography plays a big role in that. Mississippi is a lot different than Kansas, and then which the school we were at in Kansas is a little different because a lot of the coaches weren't from there, so they were fine with picking kids from all over the country to come there and be on the team. And then last year we were in Oakland, which is California JUCO's totally different than the nationwide programs. So no scholarships and stuff. So that was just a totally different world. I think we did a good job of showing the differences, even though it's all the same thing, how different it can be depending on, where you are in the country.
Yeah. And just for the audience, so season 1 and 2 took place in Mississippi in a very small town. And season 2 and 3 was in Independence, Kansas, also a very small town in the middle of nowhere. So seasons 1 through 4 had a very fish out of water. They were getting students or athletes from all over the country who had either had some sort of academic issue, personal issue, but yet had an insane amount of talent to come to these schools. Correct me if I'm wrong. To come to these schools.
No, exactly.
And then they would basically get them back on track academically, their social issues that they might have, get those back on track, and then from there they would then go on to like a D1 school and play and play at a D1 school. But season 5 was so different, it felt like, because I think nearly every player was from the Bay Area. And so it wasn't that fish out of water story that season 1 through 4 was, because every player was there. Their families lived there. They lived at home or whatnot. And there's no dorm life. So how did that affect you guys shooting?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And that actually, season 5 had a whole new group of problems that we knew we were going to face them going into it, but we honestly didn't know exactly how we were going to address all of it, which a lot of that is on campus. There's no on-campus dorms or housing, which, in Mississippi and Kansas, they had that. And that's just a great opportunity as a filmmaker to just go and be around the players and, see what's going on and or even just do interviews in their space, but these kids, in Oakland, they're there all day, but they don't have their own space. So they're all in community spaces, which are, it's still, it's still good for filming groups of people, but to get intimate alone situations with these kids was almost impossible. I mean, it's always noisy. There's always something going on. And I mean, they don't have a lot of downtime. They're always in meetings, doing film, doing the football stuff. So that was a huge change for us. But, we just adapted and just kept moving. Same with, campus was just noisier and more people than normal. And they weren't restrictive, I guess, but they were a little more on top of us than, say, like Independence, Kansas, where, once we were there, they didn't care. If we wanted to go to a classroom, we'd check with the teacher, like, do you mind if we film today? And she'd say yes or no. But it was a lot different in Oakland. It was just a lot more strict from the school side of things, which made it harder on us.
And logistically, none of the kids lived on campus, so having to be spread more thin and travel around the city up to an hour and a half is definitely a new thing.
Yeah, there was some kids lived an hour and a half, 2 hours away, so you actually had to put a little more thought into, hey, when are we going to go home with Ray and see what he has going on, unless it was a pressing matter. But in the other towns, we'd go knock on the door and be like, hey, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
So that was a little that was harder on the producers to make sure that we were still able to cover everything we need to cover.
I remember reading an article when season 4 came out, and the article had summarized, I can't remember where it was from, New York Times or somewhere, and they had summarized that if you're into football, would I like this show? And the answer was yes. And then it said, what if I'm not into football? Would I still like this show? And the answer was still yes. And I think what you guys did such a good job of, I've watched all 5 seasons, is it's not just about football. It's about people. It's about stories. It's about relationships. How do you guys find, there's obviously, 50 some people on a football team roster. How are you figuring out who is the storyline? Because you usually pick like 3 to 5 people that you're following as a main storyline. How do you find out about their backgrounds, and how do you pick those people? And do you feel that is a huge part of the story? Obviously, winning and losing, that helps the season. That helps if they're in a championship game, great. That helps the season and whatnot. But I think with a lot of shows that revolve around real life people that aren't they're not story driven, it makes sense that you got to have people who are interesting, that will open up, that will be natural on camera. And how do you juggle that? How do you find those people?
Well, it's, throughout the years, we've definitely fine-tuned it. And really, I don't have too much to do with that, but I think Greg Whiteley, and then he has a team of story producers, whoever it is each season. I think it just goes to show how much work and thought they do put into it. But we kind of start off, usually there's a little summer, what we call a scout. We'll go whichever schools are interested. Before their season starts, we usually go there for at least a couple days. And that gives Greg and them a time to mingle and kind of talk to the players. And they, you just kind of instantly know whether someone's going to be good on camera, whatever their story may be. And then you just kind of meet them and you just get a feel for them. And then I think Greg just does his homework. He obviously talks to like the head coaches, like, hey, which players are going to be, what stories are good, what players have the most to lose this season or have the most to gain, so you just start chipping away at it. And then I don't know, I'd say we start with maybe a list of, sometimes maybe up to 15 that are interesting. And then, it might be 10. But in the first few weeks that we just spend time with them, and then the objective is to just shrink that down to 5 or 4, because at some point we just can't spend that much time with that many people, and that'll hurt the show in the long run. So it's tough, man. It's we always end up with 4 or 5 really good characters that are really interesting to do on camera, but there's 10 more on the team that have the same stories and just as good. It's just there's just something that sometimes it just doesn't work as well for the way we work, or or the season. And you hate to say, I know Greg and the producers a lot, they never want it to be based on just like, will they play in the games, because there's a lot of players that are great people that we want to tell their story that don't play. But it's kind of hard in editing and to do a full arc if they never play in the game, because then it's like they go away during the game part of the episodes, and it's just tough on them. So I think through the years they've kind of always kept that as one of the most important parts, because if they don't have, it just makes it easier for them to tell a whole story if they're actually one of the players that plays the most. But but it doesn't take anything away from the other guys. It's just easier to tell a story in this format,
And Greg, he does such a great job of finding those people that just have such unique stories. I mean, Greg, the creator of the show, he's also the creator of the Netflix show Cheer, and done several other things. So I think he has this way of figuring out what is the best storyline and what's going to connect with the nation, so to speak. I mean, when you look at some of the characters that are on people that are on Last Chance U or Cheer, I mean, they've really captured the heart of the nation, and these people become somewhat Kardashian famous, reality TV show famous, because of their background. And I mean, the stories for this show are just incredible. My wife, who she won't sit down and watch Sunday football with me for anything, but she'll sit down and watch every season of Last Chance U with me, and she has favorite characters that she just absolutely loves. Bobby Bruce from seasons 3 and 4 was her absolute favorite character, and I think he was a lot of people's favorite character, not because he was the best player on the field, but because of his background and his story. And so I think that's what Greg. And I've actually been on set with these guys several times, and one thing that really impressed me with Greg was, I remember sitting in Video Village, and there's all these things happening during a game, and Greg would be like, no, and he would tell a camera guy, don't get that. That's not important. We're not going to use that in post. And Greg knew you could tell he was almost mentally editing what was going to happen in the edit. Mm-hmm. And so he knew what was important and he knew what wasn't important. And I think that's not something that every director always knows, especially when you're shooting a very crazy reality doc show.
Yeah, I would say though with that is that he only does that on games. He's very good about games and not getting wasted stuff. He knows what's important. But our style of filmmaking for the rest of stuff that we shoot, our verite stuff, day-to-day stuff, we love to just get in a situation and just let it happen. So we never, he's never saying, I won't use that, I won't do that. Like, I think that's another reason that we've been able to gather so much just intimate footage, intimate moments with people, is we just try to hang out in there, wherever it is, more than you would normally. Even if you feel like, oh, this isn't going anywhere, it's like sometimes you got to sit there another 20 minutes and you just get a little nugget of information that you don't know is even important until you're editing. But yeah, Greg's very good about that. And throughout the seasons, I think he's figured out now what is useful and what isn't. And I just do want to say though, Greg, I think one of his main attributes is that he knows how to build a team, and especially like his story producers and then his camera team. he knows how to build a team of talented people that he can trust to get what he needs when he can't be there, because he's not there all the time. Sometimes he's just not able to be. And I think, he'll say it, he sings everyone's praises often, but I think that's one of his strongest characteristics, is he's very good at just trusting that he has the right people in place and letting them do their job, and then he just kind of decides which direction he likes stuff and kind of molds the final product. And that's, I think, why every year it's so good.
Yeah. Now, as far as like crew wise, how does your guys' crew break up? How many members are on crew? Like Devin, how many people do you guys have like on, like, as far as do you have a first and a second, and how does that kind of work? And then how many camera operators? David, obviously you're a camera operator. How does the crew kind of break up and get knowing what to shoot, because you are covering so many subjects and covering in Oakland especially so much distance?
Well, it kind of evolved, right, Terry? I mean, we started just like 2 cameras kind of hanging out around the dorms in a parking lot, just meeting people. Now 4 years later, it's 12 cameras at a game with half a dozen assistants. And then day to day, it also breaks up. We started with just 1 or 2 crews and up to 3 at times. So yeah, it's evolved. And it's changed everywhere we've gone, kind of by what we need to, where we need to be at what time.
And then now, David, you're part of the main camera crew, because I know you guys break up, like there's game crew where you'll add on additional people, and then there's like story crew. Now, David, you're part of the story crew, right?
Kind of, yes. So the add what you're asking and what Terry and Devin has said is we have 3 crews basically on a day-to-day before a game, so Monday through Friday, and it's we kind of, sorry, I'm in my computer. By season 5, have it down to not a science, because it's always different and always different areas, different people, but I think by season 5. I've learned enough from the previous seasons that I can just, go. It's exploring for me. I go exploring. I take a camera, whether I'm shooting. I mean, my list of things to do on a day-to-day were kind of larger than most, I think. So I was shooting as much B-roll, stick B-roll as I could, or I was putting the gimbal, the Ronin 2, onto a black arm on the back of a golf cart, on the front of a truck, and then ending at practice. Before or after lunch for 3 hours on the Segway. So it was kind of broken up on, what we needed for the day, where the guys were at it there in the main campus side, the athletic side all day. Then I would just go explore with my AC or a grip or someone on the academic side, and we would just shoot, morning light sticks, and then when the sun hit at a certain point, because everything was very articulate there in the buildings and the way the sun fell, we were going for a certain style. So I would time my stuff around where the guys are at, where the A crew was at, where B crew was at, where the sun was at a certain time, and try and keep notes mentally of what I got with certain lights. And so I was gone by myself most of the time on a day-to-day. We would always kind of regroup at practice and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I should probably break it down, just because I'm sure there's people watching that really have no idea what. So our day-to-day would be, like, I would be on A camera, and I also have a B camera operator who's also named Devin, Devin Hoff Weeks, and we would be considered the A and B, Verite units, and we have, a sound guy and an AC and and a story producer with us, and throughout the day we're usually getting the story stuff, whether it's a classroom or football, locker room stuff or tape or whatever. And then David, who, I think it was just he was C camera, right? I think he was C camera. But the beauty of which this started in season 3 when I took over, I just knew that one of the struggles we always had in the first 2 seasons was that, especially as a DP, you want to shoot every single frame of the show, which is impossible on a show this size. But also, if you're doing all the story stuff, yeah, I have a little bit of time every once in a while to go back and get B-roll shots, maybe. But there's a lot of times I don't, because you'll be in a location and then you get in a car with somebody and then you drive off and it's like, hey, we didn't get an exterior, we didn't, we need to get some signage, whatever it is to help with the editors. And then you try to make a list and go back later, but it never happens. Or you're going to get it 3 weeks later and then the light's wrong and it doesn't cut and all that stuff. So I knew having David, I just, one thing about having the way we use David, and I think a lot of producers and directors and people it's a hard sell just because money wise, they just think it's crazy to ever have somebody that's just off doing he's either doing B-roll or he's doing gimbal work throughout the day, whether it's practice or not. So there's a lot of times where, yeah, like he said, he'll put it on a golf cart and he'll just drive around campus with a black arm and the gimbal, and he'll find players or students and he'll follow them and get that slow-mo gimbal, we call specialty shot stuff that the editors, they eat that stuff up. You can't have enough. There's days where we'll outfit a truck, so we can drive around the city at different times of day, getting the same stuff. And that stuff is invaluable. A lot of people won't want to, I'm just thinking of other projects, not ours, but a lot of people would never say, they'll be like, oh, we'll get that at the end. We'll just do it for 2 days. But I think by having David at the disposal to do that, and also to always be kept, he's just out there like looking for B-roll, and he finds the things that you can only catch at that perfect time, sort of like street photography or anything else. If you're not there at that exact right time, you don't have that shot. And I think one of our strongest points of our show is that our B-roll and some of the non-verite stuff is super strong, because we actually take the time to just be out there and trying to find magical moments or the perfect light or whatever it is. Even if it's just an exterior of a building, we try to find the right time to do it to where it holds that cinematic feel that you wouldn't get on a normal television show where they're like, hey, we just got to shoot it before we leave. And I think at least from the producers director side, they understand it now. We didn't have it on the basketball season, and I think people have, it's become a problem a little bit. We've been able to, and especially with COVID, it kind of screwed it all up. So I think it was noticeable that we didn't have the same stuff that we had before. But I would just say it's extremely important if you want to make the style of show that Last Chance U is, which is cinematic, long form. It's 8-hour season, so the amount of B-roll shots is, I don't know the math, but it's probably a third of the show, and that's not including the gimbal specialty stuff that he's doing on the side. A lot of times we'll just talk, or I'll maybe one day I'll get to go with him for an hour, and then I'll just be like, all right, man, just, we just need a bunch more of this. So anytime you feel it's right, or you see somebody, go grab it. And then he circles back around, and then he meets us at practice. And then at practice, some days we would do, he would do his gimbal on his Segway and run around, get slow-mo at practice, get really cool action stuff. But then there's days where I'll be like, hey, just jump on the long lens, which we always had a couple 50 to 1000s, which we Canon zooms that we would use. We use them at the games to cover the games, but since we had him anyway, I would have him jump on a few days a week at practice and get 72 frames a second stuff of.
Yeah,
and you can pick off some really cool stuff that people don't even know you're filming them. You get a lot more intimate stuff like that.
Yeah, well, let's jump into let's talk. We've talked a lot about creative and a little bit about what the show is and whatnot. Let's talk a little bit about technical stuff. So what camera did you use for the show, and why did you choose that particular camera?
Well, so for season 5, I'll just say before, this has always been a Sony show, but the first 4 seasons we chose the F55. which was actually a killer camera for us. At the time, it was the camera that had the most features that could just do anything without having, you didn't need all this extra stuff. It had high frame rate, it had RAW, it had global shutter, it had all, and it was pretty lightweight. And it was, I mean, we didn't really have any issues with it through all kinds of different weather. But, then Sony, when they released the Venice, it definitely was exciting. I didn't get my hands on one for a while. I was worried it was going to just be too big, but then once I saw it, I was like, oh, I can make this work for sure. It's really not even bigger than F55. It's just a little bit wider. It's a little bit heavier, but yeah. So season 5, we switched to the Venice, which, opened up a whole new world of creative possibilities for us. We, with the RAW recorder, you can shoot the XOCN LT codec, which is huge. RAW, but it's small enough file size that it's not overwhelming for post. I mean, it's a lot still because we shoot a lot of footage. I mean, we shoot almost on a regular day, probably 8 hours worth of footage every day, but a game day is, I don't know, astronomical.
Yeah, and you guys you were one of the first people that I remember shooting in XOCN codec, and I remember you guys doing several tests and stuff. And you were actually the ones who pointed out to me that shooting in XOCN, the LT version, was nearly identical file size to shooting AVC internally, or XAVC internally. And so, but yet it gave you guys so much more latitude and so much more options in post. And so the file size, like you were mentioning, is not much different. And so, and I think you guys actually even utilized that in season 4 on the F55.
I was gonna say,
yeah.
We put the new R7 came out. We use it on F55 for, I think, just season 4, right, Devin?
Yeah.
I think it was just season 4. Yeah, and it was, the coloring, the color science, and the coloring later. How helpful it is unbelievable.
And being able to just add 2 cards. I mean, some of our interviews will easily go, one card's 158 minutes, and we'll just load it with 2 and even 3 sometimes. So that was pretty cool to, go step up to that.
This I was gonna say, the 2 slots, having 512 cards in there, being able to shoot for that long of time. Anytime you're shooting interviews, that's always the concern. When you're shooting on other cameras that may have 1 slot and you got a 256 gig CFast card or something, and then you're going, how long is this interview gonna run? How long is this gonna run? We got to swap out. And so I think that's probably a huge advantage to the Sony camera and that R7 recorder, is being able to drop in 2 slots and run with it. Now, did you guys end up shooting in full frame or S35, since that camera's capable of both? And was that part of a determining factor?
Well, so, we've been Super 35 size sensor the whole time. For the Verite, the normal story, day-to-day stuff, we stuck with that, the 4K Super 35 sensor, and also just because of lightweight zooms and stuff that you need to shoot the way I like to shoot, docs style, that was necessary. But of course, you have full frame and you have the lenses, I'm gonna find a way to use them. But I definitely used it. I used it so for interviews, the sit-down interviews that we do, I shot those in the 6K full frame format. And we use the Zeiss, the Supreme Primes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Supreme Primes. We had those with us, and I also used it for a lot of specialty stuff, the specialty shots where I just wanted to get some, crazy depth of field stuff. Also the sidelines at the games. So A and B came shot with a prime lens. Full frame on the sidelines during a game.
And I know this was one thing that you were, you and Gabe before you was so adamant about, was to make this show look different than watching Sunday football. And Sunday football looks great, but watching Sunday football on CBS or Fox everybody is so far, the cameras are all so far away on crazy zoom lenses. And I know you were telling me that one thing that you guys wanted to do was put prime lenses on the cameras and force yourself not to be able to zoom in, but to physically have to get in the huddle, get in the action. And so you want to talk a little bit about how that really comes out on screen?
Yeah, I mean, especially during the games, you just feel like you're a player or a coach, and you're just in there with with the team. It's super intimate. And yeah, like you said, it forces the camera to get closer to the subject. And the way we structure the games with A and B camera, we're focused solely on characters and what we call story stuff on the sidelines. So we're not doing any gameplay unless a guy just falls at our feet or something. But all the game action is covered by many other cameras. So it just gives us the opportunity to just focus on the story elements. And a lot of times it's usually Devin, my B cam operator. He's usually just on the coach, the head coach. He just stays with him, and we'll swap back and forth if he gets tired, because it's a lot of running. It's just following a crazy man running around yelling all the time, no matter what season it is. Well, that's what head coaches do. But yeah, it's incredible how intimate it makes it feel, especially when it's edited, and then this player's story, and they're getting and I can get right up there in their face, and you get those tight shots, those close-ups. But you can tell that I'm 5 inches away from them. You can feel it. You really can.
Yeah, I remember coming up to visit you guys, and you were showing me a screen grab from it when you were just starting to shoot full frame with the Venice, and I mean, you got shots that are literally the lens is almost touching the face guard of someone's helmet to get right in their eyes, and it just has such a unique look that makes it look so much different than every other sports show that's out there. And so I think that's really cool and really important, and it makes your subject just stand out from the background shooting in full frame, and I think that's really cool.
Absolutely.
And then zoom wise, you said that you used you were in Super 35, and you guys used some zoom lenses. You want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, our main my main lens I use day to day was the Fuji, the Cabrio 19-90. It's still, I don't know, it's just a workhorse of a lens. It just covers a good range, especially for the style of verite that we do. But it's still small, compact, and super sharp, and it's a pretty lens. That was the go-to for day to day. And then at the games, I guess really the only other zoom would be at the games. We have 2 of the 50 to 1000 Canon zooms that we put in the end zones, and it just helps cover the game action.
One zoom we'd also use the Sigma 18 to 35.
That's true.
Turned out to be pretty useful, especially on like the Rialto and like tight situations.
I did have, we had that in kind of a back pocket zoom that does help in a lot of, especially if I get into a car with someone or some tight place. The 18 to 35 is very helpful, because it gives you that little bit of bump if you just can't quite get close enough, or if something, it gives you that little bit of extra, but it's not like you're getting close-ups with it or anything. It's just
Now, Devin, from an AC's perspective, going from the Sony F55 in the first couple of seasons to the Venice, what kind of differences in builds when you're building the camera up, when you're using it? What worries did you have? What things did you think about and that went through your head? And then solutions to any of those issues or advantages?
Well, I've gotten pretty confident with Sony and for the F55. I mean, from being in Mississippi and that weather, 100% humidity, 6 days a week, to then Kansas, below freezing temperatures. And the menus were pretty similar. I was pretty confident with it. With any build, we're just always trying to make it as light, compact as possible, because they're holding it all day, literally all day sometimes. I'm trying to think what challenge. I mean, definitely, I'm always worried about like hot swapping batteries, because more often than not, we could be filming a situation where I'll sneak in and like Indiana Jones style, like change the battery while we're rolling to not interrupt what's going on. Which not all cameras can actually do that. That's a very small AC thing that I love about that camera.
And you guys came up with a really cool solution actually to be able to hot swap and not turn anything off too. Which is basically you can explain it, but yeah, you guys came up with a really good solution. And I think you came up with that in like season 4.
Yeah, we started. Well, a lot of cameras don't have the best power options, so other companies have made products like Wooden Camera. We started using their D boxes, kind of sending everything through that, and then using a mini XLR to full size XLR, and then like an Anton Bauer plate as like an in between battery, so I could just stab that in, and then swap the battery and unplug that. But then you guys started, and batteries evolved and started having P-taps and USBs built in. So then they came out with their new D box, and we could go 4-pin XLR to P-tap. So I could just use the new battery, plug it in, remove the old battery, snap it on, and unplug the cable, and have like a really.
And he does that usually while it's on my shoulder, while a scene's happening. He crawls in behind me, or I'll be on an easy rig holding it, but he can just come in and swap, and I don't have to cut. I don't have, honestly, it usually doesn't even disrupt the scene if he can get in and out of the room.
Yeah, I guess after so
smoothly.
Many months of being around these people, and they see me come in and do little things.
Yeah,
I think it does become a little more invisible than you'd imagine. Or sometimes if it's like there's someone's like legit crying and breaking down, I'll just stab the camera and stand behind him and just like wait it out that extra 10 minutes that we need or whatever.
Yeah. Now, you guys you shot some high-speed stuff as well, right? Now, the games, you guys are shooting in a certain frames per second in certain areas, but then maybe not in others. You want to tell us a little bit about what kind of your philosophy behind those are?
So we shoot a lot of, for the game, so the long lens in the end zone with those long zooms, we shot that at 72 frames per second, which it's slow enough that it's dramatic and it's can be used in dramatic ways, and also helps catch the little moments that sometimes in a football game stuff happens so fast that it helps you see those little, whether it's a tough catch or whether the ball hit the ground, all the same stuff that you would see on TV, but it also gives the post editors the opportunity to go back to 24 if they need it, if they don't want it slow-mo, so they can just use it as as just a normal shot in the edit of someone running. And then they also have the opportunity to ramp, so they ramp sometimes too, which is really cool. And then really after that, it's just I'll do some specialty stuff where I'll do, it's been 60 in the past. We did a lot of 72. Now it converts a little bit better. And then
now
David,
I would assume shooting with that Canon 50-1000, as it's not the fastest lens out. Obviously when you're shooting on primes, no problem. But when you're shooting on that lens, did the dual ISO? Were you guys using the dual ISO feature on Venice?
Yeah, I think we tried to keep that lens at an 8, I believe, at 72 frames a second. Under stadium lights. Depending on the stadium, I would adjust the shutter of it based on flicker issues. I don't remember, each place kind of was its own thing. But yes, so with the Venice, we were able to do that by having the dual ISO. So the 2500 base, we actually ended up shooting 5000, I believe, for all. So if you're watching the show, any of the, you can see the end zone cameras, the long telephoto stuff, that it's all 5000 ISO. And it wouldn't be doable without that. And it cleans up great, and it looks so nice, and it cuts well. I use the 5000 ISO a lot in like night car scenes, like if I'm riding with a player or you'll see scenes where I'm riding with a police officer through Oakland at night, and I just shot that all available at 5000 ISO on the Venice, and it looks awesome. So that was huge for us.
Now, David, something that's super interesting that a lot of people don't know is, you kind of mentioned your gimbal setup, and a lot of people use gimbals, but I don't know very many people, or if anybody uses the gimbal the way that this show uses it. Can you tell us a little bit about your gimbal setup and how you're able to accomplish and capture some of these just insane shots of practice in the game, and kind of just walk us through that?
Yeah, so I ride, which is, a little more common now, but I've been doing it for over 4 years now. When the Segway Mini Pro came out and is available to buy on Amazon, back when I had my Mobi Pro, and it was, that was something. My friend Easton Teal, local guy that lives in Florida now, literally sent me a link saying, with my rollerblade and skateboard background, you need to check this out and buy it. This is perfect for you. And so I did. And once I stood on the Segway Mini Pro and rode around my house and neighborhood, I was like, this is easy. So let me put a camera on. And so then when kind of backtrack a little bit, when Terry called me for season 3, I told him like, hey, I got the Segway and I think it's going to be really cool for the show. I think we can make it work. And, I think he was slightly skeptical about me getting killed on it around 50 football players during practice.
That never happened.
And so the progression of that, we used it on the show, and then I showed, the guys, and this is what I can do. Obviously, smoother areas are a lot easier for me to get tracking shots or whatever. To go back to season 3 and 4 in Kansas, especially season 3, our practice field was very bumpy, and so my legs went numb really quick. So that was a challenge there. People want to know about challenges with the Segway, and it's getting a good shot, keeping a really good frame for, longer than 10 seconds each slow-mo shot, trying to think about that constantly, where the eye line is at, bumping all over a field, chasing a play that's could be unpredictable. And so by the time we ended up on season 5 in Laney with a really beautiful field, very smooth, it was, also moving up to the Ronin 2 and having that gimbal be able to hold the Venice full build was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. You say that the Segway is easy to ride, and I can attest that it's not easy to ride if you're not very coordinated, because I certainly cannot ride it very well. And the fact that David and I've been on set and seen him, and it's pretty impressive that he's riding a mini Segway, controlling it with his legs. He has you got like a ready rig on, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. It's like a ready rig.
He's ready rig.
And then a Ronin 2 with a fully built Venice R7 and a prime lens, wireless focus, wireless video, and
it's a heavy load.
It's pretty incredible to see.
And 90% of the stuff he shoots, he's operated. Like, he's doing the framing. A lot of times, if it's a specialty thing, I'll try and operate on the wheels, but most of the time he's also framing the shot up. And I can't believe the stuff you get, man. It's very incredible.
It's been cool to go from season, like, I don't know if it was 1. I think we started with the original Ronin, and it's been cool for the last 4 years. We basically kind of, when consumer gimbal level stuff came out to now, we've gotten kind of to go through the whole gamut from Ronins to Movies, Ronin 2s, and kind of dial it in.
The tech has progressed unbelievably, which has helped it, but his skill also.
I was going to say, I don't recommend people going out and just buying a Segway and putting, $100,000 camera lens combo and just riding around, because it definitely takes some practice and skill.
Yeah, I definitely am nerdy enough to say I practice in the driveway. So
yes, he puts the time in. Very good at what he does. I just was saying, just for the show, it's not just like, oh, hey, he gets these, pretty, perfectly smooth gimbal shots of a live action, football team playing. But by having the Segway, the amount of shots he can get over and over, where you could still get that shot, whether, if you were hand holding it or had an easy rig or you were walking, it might not be as smooth, but he can move quickly to one side of the field and then know if he needs to get to the other side, he just, on that Segway, he's on the other side in 8 seconds. So during practice, he's up and down, he's all over. And the amount of awesome shots he can get in an hour is incredible. It would take 3 days on a commercial,
When we started, I remember we were trying to get certain specialty shots, and by the time we'd run to the other side of the field with like a Dane dolly or something to try to get something, you'd miss it, and the team had moved to a different drill. So even like, I remember we would try to do the long lens around the field, and we ended up switching from simply just a Mitchell mount hi-hat on a long lens to a 150 mil ball. Like, just that amount of time of like leveling with wedges, you'd like miss it. Yeah. So then now we've come all the way to what David does.
Something when
Gabe, I just want to break it down, because you did kind of ask the technical, how my setup is. So I'll explain it really quick.
Yeah, go for it.
So we have the Ronin on season 5. We had the Ronin 2 on the Segway, which I had to beat the Segway up. So I put a chip in there. So my speed went from stock I think it go 0 up to like 10 miles an hour. And when I beat it up, I put bigger tires on there because, that was the progression I needed through bumps. And, I just can't handle football fields that. It can handle them, but not that great. So we beat the tires up. I added a chip that allowed me to go up to about 17 miles an hour, which was kind of a hacked deal, but I tested it for weeks and weeks and weeks to make sure I wouldn't fall off, and it seemed to hold. And then to the gear wise, the Ready Rig with the new Vega back, which the Vega is, these bands that typically take a lot of the walking steps out. So the Segway just adds that additional, you have no up and down movement in your shot, whether you're going really inch slow or, up to 17 miles an hour chasing someone sprinting across the football field. And then the City Milled parts, which I had a lot of those on there, his 360 Swivel Mount basically allowed me to be anywhere on the track at any rotation. So whether I'm really going forward on the Segway and I have it spun around 360 and I can see in my monitor the guys, so I can be tracking in front of them. I can go from a scraping the ground shot of their feet all the way up to their eye line in seconds. And I also could be on, following off the track into a dorm room, down the hallway, to the back of a classroom. That setup was pretty much perfect to allow me to be anywhere at any time.
Yeah, and one thing when I was there visiting you guys in Oakland, one thing that I thought was so cool is because it's JUCO football, I do think you guys probably get away with a lot more filming on the sidelines than you probably would in like NFL or NCAA. Because David, I mean, a touchdown would be scored, and next thing you know, here goes at 15, 16 miles an hour, a Segway goes jetting on the field and is circling players, chest bumping and celebrating and whatnot. And so
and we did. We were
like Terry, those are the shots like Terry was mentioning. Like you can't run out there with an easy rig that quick and get those shots, but with a Segway, he's out there, he's circling and he's getting the celebration. He's up and down the sidelines, one end of the field to the other end of the field, and I think that's so important. But the other thing is, yes, it's a football show, and so the gimbal portion comes into play when you're outside. But you guys also used it inside a ton for establishing shots of offices and hallways and film projection rooms. And I mean, some of the most epic Roger Deakins shots are, David just creeping backwards down a hallway. He's just riding in reverse down a hallway, revealing students coming out of doorways from classrooms and stuff. So I think, it's you guys definitely used it as a creative tool and not necessarily just for football, but for so many other things.
No, definitely. And I think anywhere you would want to put like, a slider or something, or anywhere these guys could go, I just found a way to take the Segway there. And my AC and I would be just, I'd be walking up strapped completely on the Ready Rig upstairs to the other level where the classrooms are. Because I know, production at 3:00, they're breaking, and then our guys are going to walk. And so I would run up those stairs, and my AC would be, have his follow focus on his strap and pick the Segway up. I would jump off, we go up the stairs, he would turn it back on, and we would go, and it literally took 5 seconds. So
now, I know. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's just so invaluable. Like, you reminding me of all this stuff that even if we had the idea to get that shot, I don't know how we would schedule it because, we're so story based on this show. I mean, that's the most important. But just having David like, hey, I need hallway stuff. So he would do some, tripod or lock offs, stick B-roll, as we would say. But, you do enough of that. And then he'd be like, all right, I'm going to do a bunch of Segway, gimbal hallway stuff there. I'd be like, that's awesome. Find good light and turn the lights on and off or, do different stuff. And he would get every lighting scenario he could. And he had the time to sit there, and he also knew the class schedules. Like he said, at 3:00, the class is going to get out and there's going to be a bunch of kids coming down the stairs and, whatever it is. And man, just having that time to do it right is huge. And I think it's what takes the show that extra little step of that. I just don't think most productions just wouldn't put the effort or the time or the money into doing that stuff.
Yeah, and we actually had a question. We had a question on the gimbal, and a lot of people are wanting to know how much do you locally control the gimbal versus having a like a second operator control the head, and then also are you always having a focus puller, or how do those work?
I would say yes. I always have a focus puller because, we're full frame sometimes, and we're just the lenses, and we're trying to make it as artsy and pretty as we can. So to, make sure we're sharp, I always have a full-time AC with me, and that is huge. That was a huge game changer, and a relief just to know I can focus on framing and my movement, and they can always, whether it's I think Devin switched 2 ACs out with me throughout the 3 months I was there, Aaron Kirby and Ethan Sterling. And yeah, they would know my builds. They know I liked everything. They had, start stop capability on whatever focus unit they were using. And they can, they would follow me around, have their wireless monitor set up, and they would just, we knew the campus so well, so they knew if we were in a locker room, he's going to stay right outside the door and hide behind this wall or something, and I'm just going to float back and forth. And yeah, I would always tune the head and the motors to where I was pretty much controlling all frame by myself, unless it was a specialty shot that we all had time to be on. When I say all, A crew and myself. And then Terry would jump on wheels and really would perfect a move that way.
And we'd all have, we'd use like open headset comm systems. So an AC would have one. If we're doing, basically everyone involved would always have one. Sometimes we'd get a grip to also be a spotter for some stuff, just depending on what the need was. That helped a lot.
Yeah.
And then I would always have like a, like whatever, we tried different focus units over the years, but, I'd have like a wireless monitor. Sometimes we'd have the whole like sling bag wireless setup. We tried the belts. I've tried everything, and now we're more to like a 703 bolt with like a L series battery, just a Preston or a Civolution or whatever that is.
Because you guys have to be mobile too, so they're not setting up, monitor on a stand and then David's running around. Like they're kind of chasing David a lot of the time. So it's pretty, because football field's big.
Just when I was running behind him.
Yeah.
Devin and I joke because Devin does have he bought a Segway just to have on set in LA, so he could just zip around quickly because he's a skateboarder too, and he finds it very easy. And we made a joke because like, dude, because he's always pulling for Terry, so it's like if Devin was with me, we had a joke of, hey, what if we both have Segways and we can just chase each other? And I was like, you know how stupid we're gonna look at it if we both have Segways. I'm the only one that's gonna ride the Segway. You
can be the only Segway.
Well, I got to say, just from being on set with you guys, everybody is always chasing the camera because you're always chasing the players. And so whether that is David on a Segway, Terry, I did a behind the scenes video that you can watch on Able Cine's website on kind of some of this. And following Terry with a behind the scenes camera and me and the boom operator, I mean, it's a workout. And I think that just goes to the whole fact of this show is not scripted. This show is not, hey, do that again. Hey, come back and say this. Hey, do this. This show is completely verite, where you guys are chasing players. Players are getting in arguments and fights. They're this and that. The coaches are running up and down the field screaming at the refs, and you have to follow them and you have to keep up. And so it's so different than a feature set because it's not planned, but yet you guys make it look so planned. And I think that's really a true testament to you guys' skill set and kind of really perfecting this genre of documentary.
Well, it's kind of a big machine, like we kind of tried to think of it down to like, we'd have golf carts everywhere we go, like with truck beds built out with like big waterproof Pelicans. So, if the player's going across campus, there goes Terry and the boom op. So then we'd all very quickly jump into that, follow them. Or same with our like battery charging. We had big sprinter vans that we build out and charge all our batteries in there, that we also make sure we're like dark colors or black, so it's not a bunch of white production vehicles in the shots. But again, so if like a player jumps in a car and leaves, I'd try to get ahead with a Rialto camera, be able to just literally pass that off to Terry. He jumps in the car and then we all quickly jump in the van and just kind of never stop.
Yeah, let's actually, since you brought that up, let's talk about that. You guys obviously use the Rialto, and in what aspect did you use it, and how did it help you achieve things that you weren't able to achieve in seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, man, it did a lot. So I guess the biggest thing it did for us was for our interview setup, which it's not as sexy as some of the other stuff, but we like to keep a very neutral eye eye line to the producer who's doing the interview. So years past, we always stack cameras. So we have a wide and a close camera that we stack, and they used to sit behind camera and try to sneak around and just try to keep the eye line as neutral as possible. But this year, or season 5, knowing that the extension unit or the Rialto was a possibility, I knew that would basically give me an extra camera body's worth of space. And I've always wanted to use the
iDirect.
iDirect,
yeah.
Yes. So I always want to use the iDirect, which uses a mirror for the interviewee to then, it puts their face right on the lens of the tight angle. So, but that is another 1.5 foot of space that on top of 2 other cameras, it was just too big for some of the setups we were doing in the past. But with the Rialto, I knew that I now have room for that iDirect. So by doing that, yeah, it let us create a whole new way to do interviews, which I think took it to another level. I think it's a lot it's a lot more consistent than it has been in the past.
In this season, you guys it felt to me like, and it's probably because the students didn't live on campus, it felt like there was so much more in-car shots than ever before. You guys did ride-arounds with police officers, with nearly all the athletes. Were you guys using the Rialto on the car stuff?
Yeah, so that was another, which again, we're very very fortunate to have the resources that we have on the show, because we got more and more each season. But yeah, so for most of the car stuff in the past, we would use smaller cameras, the FS7 or FS5 or something. But then with the Venice, the FX9 and all that hadn't come out yet, and I didn't want to compromise and go back down to those other cameras. So with the Rialto, I'm able to put the body of the Venice at my feet, so I can still have the controls with hopefully we have time to just put like a brick battery in the back seat with me. Sometimes not. We'll just have a shark fin that's hot stabbed if we just have to run there and go. And then that way I can just have the Rialto with usually the 18 to 35 zoom. I've done some other ones. I tried with the Cabrio a few times, depending on the type of car it is, I can decide. But that was a huge benefit by having that, because you just get tired. Sometimes I'm in there for an hour, and I don't care what camera it is. Like, I'm holding it up. I do have different my key grip Dennis, he has like a buoy that he has, or it's that I can rest the camera on, that still gives me a little bit of movement, but it's soft. Or I set it on a bunch of Fernie pads that we burrito up, or we have a bunch of different ways to do it. And every car is different, which is another issue in itself. You don't know what you're getting into. But yeah, it's just lightweight, and it keeps it manageable for an hour or something. And then I have the high ISOs and all the other good stuff that the Venice brings. So the only thing though is, obviously, if I have to get out of that car and start shooting quickly, it's a little restrictive in that sense. But normally I was able to still have my A camera build with me, so I can just grab that if I need to jump out of the car in an emergency, if something happens in the scene. But
I know one of the questions we had was, when you're doing interviews, what kind of lighting setup and what kind of G&E are you using? I know a lot of times you're doing interviews right after a game or in a parking lot. Some of them are more controlled, like in someone's office or whatnot. But how much lighting do you actually get to set up? And then and when you do get to set it up, what do you use?
Yeah, that's another something that's progressed through the seasons. The aesthetic and the style that I go for, it kind of came out of necessity originally. The first few seasons we didn't have in Mississippi. Gabe, he did have a key grip with him, but just for part of the time, and we just didn't have very much equipment. But we slowly built on it. But my main package now is it's mainly just light mats, light gear, light mat stuff, and then I'll have a sky panel or two. But for the run of the show, because it's only it's 13 weeks, and we don't have a set amount of interviews. We don't know when necessarily we're going to do an interview. We may know a day before, but usually it's the same day. Like, hey, what's your schedule? Do you have an hour to sit down with us? This happened in your story. We need to clarify some stuff. So can you sit down with us? So then producers are trying to figure that out. We're trying to figure out where we can do it that's going to be quiet, that people aren't going to be walking in on us, every 20 minutes, which is a big problem with where we were shooting in Oakland. There's just people everywhere, and we couldn't get away. But that being said, 13 weeks, I just have Dennis with me, he's my key grip, but he also, he was basically my gaffer as well. And he has just a small van package of grip and electric. But a lot of it, we can't go elaborate on these interview setups because we don't have the time, and the locations are never. There's probably a handful of times I scouted the location before we shot an interview. Usually we show up there and we have to figure it out, find a good angle, figure out what the sun's going to do. And, I don't have a whole grip and electric crew, so we're not going to be, putting giant frames outside of windows and stuff. I mean, Dennis does a lot, and he impresses me every time how much he can get done in a short amount of time by himself. But, it's not fair to him to just, do something crazy that it's going to kill him either.
But you guys are using some light mats and some different things like that. It's like very
the
run
workhorse is a light mat. Is light mats, yeah, for sure. That's the main one. I like the sky panels, the airy sky panels I used to. Those take a lot more gripping though. They're not quite as soft as I prefer. But they are nice if I need to match, fluorescence or a mixed color temp situation. I usually use those, but I just have to know that I'm going to need to do a lot more gripping for them and contain them a little bit more. But that's mainly it. Normal stuff. I guess season 5 we did have an M18 in the van, and then I did use that a handful of times, but not very much. And that mainly I use for. There's a lot of situations where we'll do interviews like on a second floor apartment or something, and we just don't have we don't have ways to get lights outside the windows except from the ground. So I'll use that to just pump through a window from ground level, on a stand.
Yeah.
To keep the ambience consistent throughout an interview. But most of my stuff's so small we would never use that, to key or anything.
Now, Devin, obviously you've worked on features, you've worked on docs, commercials, music videos. What is a huge difference between working on a feature and when working on a doc like this? Can you kind of go into the differences from an AC's perspective in working on a feature? Because I know personally that there's a lot of differences. You want to just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I don't know where to start. It's a lot. It's kind of the opposite in a lot of ways, because on a feature, everything's storyboarded out, everything's scheduled out, everything's planned out. And as an assistant, you want to be your goal is to be one step ahead of the people above you at all times. So if on a feature, you can see that if you see they're scouting for the next shot, the lenses are with them, director's finder, the height, it's all planned. This is kind of the opposite of that, where, trying to be preemptive can kind of make you have to double work. So it's really just having trying to build a crew that I trust, kind of getting a lot of procedures in place and just being really quick. And I don't know, just kind of having a diligence of just work as fast as safely possible all the time.
And it seems to me like you are the problem solver on set. It feels like when something goes wrong, they look to you, figuring out, oh, it's this product isn't working properly, or
right.
Remove the servos off the cabrios because we want to be able to go straight from the barrel with the zoom. And it feels like you're a much more of a problem solver than a focus puller. You do pull focus, obviously, for the show, but it seems like you are, a real problem solver at all times.
Well, I think we all are, the whole crew. But I think a lot of that also comes from us pushing the technology. So whether it's wireless video or the gimbals and loading them with more weight, we're kind of just always in a way putting ourselves in that position because we're trying to push the envelope and do better and get more, So for instance, and budget's always a thing. So, and same with the evolution of equipment. Like when we started the show, for instance, we had tried to use tear decks. Like the 2000, I think, just came out. but you couldn't use more than 2, maybe 3 in close proximity before they would step on each other. And eventually we then found out about the Serve Pros from Teradek, and we actually ended up using those pretty successfully to monitor like 10 cameras at a game in HD. But again, those had their own issues. So we're always just dealing with managing the technology, I guess, because we're at its limits. But yeah, just realizing the shot's king. I mean, I remember a story I tell a lot is, I think season 1 or 2, I was with Gabe Pate, and we were shooting a practice on like a slider, and a ball was coming, a deep ball, like straight at the lens. And my instinct as an assistant was to like save the lens and block the ball. And he was kind of like, that could have been the best shot, ever. Like it would have hurt the matte box maybe, but like, so I had to kind of learn to just put the content first and then everything else, and get the team to do the same thing. And just try to be as invisible as possible.
Yeah, and it feels like you always are having to roll with the punches. It's we're going to interview this person, and then they bail out on us, or something happens, or they get kicked off the team, and then you guys totally shift gears and run with something else, because this became story king at this point. And like people always say content is king, and in this instance it definitely is.
And just speed. I mean, whether it's working out of backpacks, like never powering anything down, or Terry will be shooting a scene, we have an interview, he might have a break, I'll give him a like A7 with a prime and a PL mount. He'll go like look for the shot and then go back to filming while Dennis starts setting up. It just kind of doesn't ever stop sometimes. Like having little small things, like having the iDirect like fully built, so I could just have it like a quick release plate. I could just, with the new BPA 5 system from Arri, I could just like snap on a tripod, slide the camera on, and be basic, and open up the iDirect and be ready to shoot. It'd be very close to it for that camera, at least. It's all those little things added up, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that makes a huge difference. What do you guys hope that people will take from watching the show? What kind of message do you hope that they get from it?
Man,
that's a very deep intellectual question. I'm sorry.
That was deep.
After the tech stuff.
Right. No, I mean, I just hope people will realize that there's, no matter what aspect of life you're in, whether it's athletics or whatever, that nobody has it easy, and everybody's overcoming something, and some people have a lot more to overcome than others, but just to keep pushing, and by showing this in the true light, that's not glamored up or Hollywooded up, that the real life struggles of these people, I'm hoping it brings inspiration or positivity to other people, that they can do it as well, not just about athletics, just in general, like just normal life things that people struggle with.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's so important is Greg, when he's editing it. I mean, I think anybody who knows Greg will tell you that if it's pertinent to the story, it doesn't matter if it makes someone look good or bad, or make the school look good or bad. He's going to use it, because he's not trying to fake, trying to be real. And I think that's what's made Last Chance U, in my opinion, such a success. Is it's not forced, it's not scripted, it's not whatever. He's not trying to protect the image of anybody and make the coaches look good or look bad.
Well, and I remember
he's literally portraying people as they are.
And when I remember like season 1, I remember him saying at some point, like, let's just pretend it's a nature documentary. Like, let's just learn about what this is. Like, we know nothing about these people or what they're doing. Let's just learn everything we can and observe and go from there.
Yeah, that's Greg's, that's his style, is very, it's very, very truthful, very neutral, but obviously you guys still have to tell the story. But he has a saying of, what's it say? Shoot everything with a cold eye, but a warm heart, but a cold eye.
Yeah.
Or a cold heart and a warm eye. No, it's
shoot with a cold eye, edit with a warm heart, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Which kind of, that's his style, and it always shows in all of the stuff he makes, and I think that's what makes it so good.
Now talk a little bit about, Terry, talk about a little bit about your crew. I mean, obviously you've known David since high school, right? And then you've known Devin for 5+ years and worked with him. How important is it to have, people you trust on your crew especially in these kind of scenarios where you cannot do everything, you cannot shoot everything, you cannot build your own cameras. How important is that?
Oh, it's the most important thing it's the most important aspect that I don't worry about it, but that I'm concentrated on each. We've been able to build a crew that has stuck together, so it's most seasons now it's not as big of a deal, but it is. I can't express it to anyone who's getting into a situation like this. You have to have people you can trust, that you can, like you said, I can't be everywhere. B crew with Devin, Hoff Weeks, my B camera operator. There's sometimes if we don't end up at practice, usually we try to end up at practice, cover practice, multiple units, but if not, like I might not see him for 2 or 3 days, and I'm just trusting that he's doing what is necessary for the show. And obviously he has producer stuff, but he's just doing his best to do what he thinks I would want to get. And after season 4, he started, right? Season 4, right off, after a week or two in, he knew exactly what needed to be done. I never worried about it for a second after that. Same with David. Once we just kind of got moving, and he realized what I would want, and then that I'm fine with him taking his own liberties and finding something creative or finding something pretty. Go out there, find the best stuff. That's all we need. And then once the show came out and he saw the edits and what they used and what they liked, David was smart enough to kind of study his own stuff and be like, well, I know they didn't really like this, but they do like this stuff. Or if I do screw this move up, they'll probably still use it anyway. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff you learn. But yeah, it's invaluable. My crew is my biggest secret weapon. It's and Devin he runs a tight ship, which we have 5-6 seasons in, so he's seen everything now. But he's very organized, and I think when he explains his setups of just having the equipment ready, it's every day he pretty much has anything I could ask for ready to go in the van, which is a lot. But we just don't know what we're going to get into, and there is no, hey, let's go back to the hotel and get this, or every once in a while something special come up, and maybe David will have something I need, and he's across campus or somewhere else, and we'll have to call him or whatever, and he'll rush it over to us. But it's very rare. It's just being ready for anything, man, and just knowing that the crew is there to, like you said, rolling with the punches though, because it's going to change. So you just have to have a group of people that enjoy what they're doing and know that it's going to change, and it's going to be hard work. But
it's a commitment. I mean, we were on the road.
Yeah, it's a commitment.
Some crews 6 days a week for the 14 weeks or whatever, out of town. So having a good attitude is what I look for as well. And the guys under me.
It's attitude, yeah.
Yeah. Just
and it's a grind, man. Like you said, it's 6 days a week for a crew. And we're there for 13 weeks. But there's something about this show that the crew members, I don't know anyone that hates working on the show. And I think, it's just a testament to the people that are working on it and the people that we're around. But I think it's also the lack of, complete structure too. Every day is kind of an adventure. We really don't know what we're going to get into. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Some days get boring though, and you're in class all day, and I get it. That sucks. But then the next day, who knows what you're going to be doing? You're going to be on a boat or something, or someone's going to be in the hospital. Like, you have no idea what's going to happen. So that keeps the crew, I think, motivated and excited. And then at the end of every week, there's going to be a game, and game day is its own beast, and it's kind of exciting, right? It kind of gives us a reset of like, all right, now it's game day. We don't do as much.
I love game days.
I didn't even know anything about football really before this show. I didn't know, I didn't watch football. I didn't really know much about it. Now I love football. And same with basketball. I didn't really. You could ask me how many people on a court, and I wouldn't know. But now I love it. Now I absolutely love basketball.
Now we've got some questions that people have commented in. Jeff Lee, our training director is moderating the questions online. So Jeff, I think we've got some questions from the audience. Let me see if we can find those.
Sure thing. The first one's actually a two-parter.
Okay.
What's the hardest part about working on the show? And then the second part was there ever a moment where something went wrong and you had to adapt or change, but it ended up being great for the story anyway?
Man. Definitely been some of those moments.
Nothing's ever broken, ever. I mean, again, stuff happens, whether it's a football player crashes into a camera and breaks the R5 right off the camera, like, you know, or you get in a all-out hailstorm very quickly, you know, and there's only so many bodies. And on our show, I mean, you can't, there's just no way they could afford, or it even really, as much as I would want to have a first and a second and a loader and a utility for every single camera, it's just like not realistic. So, and we've learned to do a really good job and to preemptively think about all that stuff, so nothing happens. But stuff happens.
I think it was season 2 when the F-55, you guys caught in like a rainstorm. I think it was in Mississippi, right? And the F-55 was completely soaked. I remember getting a call for the record.
I did one of them.
Terry saved one of them. He was operating his own camera with, like, I have a PhD on rain gear. I could go into rain gear on cameras all day. But where it starts raining in Mississippi, I look up and there was no stars. It was at night. And and then it just started all out. Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, it's sprinkling. What are we doing? It was like, hey, there's clouds, and then it dumped.
And he just pulled the power on it. But it was one of those things where, and you know, I am so thankful for the crew, the local ACs that I get sometimes, but occasionally I don't get the people I want or what have you. Things happen, and just that particular game, it was just nuts. And yeah, camera got wet.
But the true testament of that is that you guys did the right thing. And I remember you pulled the power from that camera immediately.
Well,
and
it didn't just sit out.
Right?
Yeah, it wasn't like it sat out in the rain either. We were pretty good at getting covered. It was actually under a tent pop-up, but the pop-up got so much water that it folded in the roof, and then all of it just dumped onto the camera that was actually under the pop-up. So it was like we were doing our best, but it just didn't.
We just pulled the power and riced it.
You killed the power, and I remember you calling me worried about it. And when we got it back, we dried it out, let it sit, and everything was totally fine. So that's honestly a testament to the build of the camera, but also if you guys would have kept using electronics when they're damp, you know, so it's the smart move. It was the smart play to we can't use this camera. We got to let it dry out. So I remember that story.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of things that have gone wrong and ended up being better.
I can't.
I think there's tons of situations where, like they're saying earlier, in terms of like, will we use this? Will we won't? I mean, there's plenty of times where we have done stuff like whether we're shooting B-roll of a swamp in the middle of nowhere, and it's a drag of a day. Maybe it's in the rain all day, but then some person drives by and stops and sees us, and then we end up meeting that person, and that person leads us down a whole nother path of story about that area or something that's super interesting. And you know, some of the places we found because of that we've gotten B-roll of, or you know, more flavor of the area.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a technical thing that might have happened, but I would say story-wise, there's been a lot of, every season has 2 or 3 scenes where we think something is going to happen, or even the characters, he has a path that day and he's going to go do this, but he changes his mind or whatever it is, which throws us for a curveball, and we kind of have to scramble. And I feel like a lot of people would just be like, well, we were going to go do this, so we're going to do that anyway. But instead we just hit the brakes, you know, everything stops. We figure out how to go do what we need to do, and then we get the scene. And a lot of times that scene ends up being something very powerful or moving that makes the show. And you're like, man, I'm glad that we scrambled and fought our way to get that, which I think one of those that I think of is is season 4, Bobby Bruce, when he gets kicked off the team. We didn't know that was happening. I mean, we knew he had we heard murmurs that he was in trouble. Coach JB didn't give us a heads up like, hey, I'm gonna cut Bobby. He didn't let us film any of it. And then we hear in the meeting when JB says that, hey, Bobby Bruce is kicked off. I'm filming the meeting, and of course the radio walkies are going nuts. Everyone's, what do you say? What do you say? Where's Bobby? Where's Bobby? Because Bobby wasn't there. So then it's mad scramble, figuring out where he is, when he's leaving, how are we going to say bye to him? You know, all this, trying to figure out what is actually happening. And we got that bus scene where he's waiting for the bus, because the coaches wouldn't let us know where he was leaving from, because they just knew it looked bad that they kicked him off the team. So that was something that that was one of those instances where they actually held stuff from us. It was very few times, but it took a lot of work and a lot of effort for us to figure out where he was going to be and which bus terminal. And it was like over 2 hours away, and we just stopped everything, jumped in the car, and we got there. But we also, and that scene made the show. I mean, how could we not have that scene in that season? But we fought all day to get that scene. And I think that, again, it's just a testament of just being ready for whatever and having that structure of, it doesn't matter, let's go get it. We don't need practice today. But also B crew is still on set to get other stuff, So we're covered enough that nothing, we're not going to miss anything too important. But that's the way this show is created, is by just running, just jumping in the van and going. And I don't care if they don't want us there, And then we got there and asked Bobby. We didn't just jump out with cameras, we were like, we said actually like, man, we're sad to see you go. We actually said our goodbyes to him. We sat there with him for a couple hours. We took him out. Well, I don't know. Yeah, we sat there with a few hours, and like he waited. His bus wasn't coming for, I think,
it was a few hours.
5 hours.
He had
to sit there for hours and hours.
No phone, no money.
Yeah, he didn't have any phone on him, so like it was hard for us to get a hold of him. But yeah, so then we got there, and we just sat with him, and then we were like, hey, do you mind while you're waiting if we just film a little bit of you waiting for your bus? He's like, yeah, of course. But we treaded lightly in that situation.
How do you guys, I know another question that I was reading is how do you guys prepare for like all the different circumstances, from, the emotional highs to the emotional lows, and like how as a shooter do you prepare for, I mean, I think Devin said it one time, you go from someone scoring a touchdown to someone getting kicked off a team to someone's parents just died. How does that take its toll on you? I mean, one scene that sticks out in my mind was when, I believe it was in the recap episode in season 3 or 4, when, you guys interviewed the parents of the kid who had gotten murdered. And one of the players was in the car with somebody who had killed him. And me remember this whole scene, and it was quite emotional. I mean, the whole family's just bawling. How do you guys prepare yourself for something like that? I mean, as a crew member, does it help to have relationships with the players? Do you guys build relationships, or are you the silent, invisible people behind the camera?
It's a fine line, I think.
Yeah, it's a fine line. And I think it's just taking years to really perfect it. But I'm definitely build relationships with them. But I would say I take another thing with the way we do it is I want to build as much of a relationship with as many people as I can, but I usually don't do it while the camera's on. So I take the time in between, if we're not shooting on something, or and I get to know them outside of the camera in their face, So I actually, try to talk to them, and I get to know them that way. But and the story producers they're doing an excellent job at the same. They're as connected to everything as I am, but I'm the front lines, and yeah, it's hard. But once I have the camera up, I am a silent observer. And it's hard. I mean, I've definitely been in situations where I want to say something, or I'm like sitting there going, this is the worst thing I could be, because it's breaking my heart. Like, this kid's getting ready to go home, or, or somebody died, or whatever it is. I don't know. It's just part of it. But that's documentaries. That's why you make it, I guess.
Well, and I think like when we're there so long and they see us working and they know we're away from our families, but like, then they start to meet like Terry and Devin and the director Greg, and they see like everyone's intentions. I think there's like a mutual respect and kind of relationship that kind of happens where they're doing their thing, we're doing our thing, which helps us become invisible, but they know we do care.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's another with a lot of people, they think you can go somewhere for a week, shoot, go home for a month, come back in a week, shoot some more stuff, go home for a month. And then when you show up, these people don't care about you. They think you're just there to exploit them. I think by us being with them so much, every single day they see one of our crews. And of course, we're respectful and we're professional, and we try to befriend them. eventually they just accept you and you're just part of the team. And then, that's how we get such intimate stuff. But it takes time. It takes the first 3 weeks. We're not, on the first season, like when we go to a new school, the first 3 weeks is pretty hard. Everyone's standoffish. They just don't know that, and there's kids, they don't trust you. It's not necessarily cameras. They just don't trust who you are yet. But we do our best. And we put the time in to make sure that, we just engage with them. We just talk to them as people. We never judge. And we just, we're interested in them. And eventually they understand that and they trust us. And that's why we get so much access.
And eventually they start wanting to get to know us, I guess, at some point,
Right. Yeah. By the end of the season, man, it's funny because like I have certain guys that I'm around more especially like key people, but then David will be off or Devin's off, because he's usually offset. So then has befriended some other players that maybe aren't on camera as much because he's able to talk to them while I'm off shooting or whatever. So everyone kind of has all these different people that they've been talking to and befriended, and you just get to know them and they care about our lives. And it's the most rewarding part of the show. That's why we love it so much.
Definitely.
Now,
and I was going to say, it's a funny
yeah.
thing when I first arrived on the gimbal and the R2 and the Segway and the whole vest, I look ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like
to them. Quite a show.
To them, I look like the Terminator. I think it was basketball. A coach called me Terminator, but they don't know what to do. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna track with them. I'm gonna roll. I'm gonna get a profile. And they're like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Just get away from me, you crazy person. And so by season 5, it's like, all right, I know to like keep a little distance, let them look at me, let them make fun of me, let them laugh. Because in Oakland, it's, a football team, they're college kids. They're going to joke with you like pretty hardcore all day long. So you got to learn to take no heat and then get in. And then, halfway through the season, I'm invisible and I'm this close to their face. And it's just David doing his Segway thing. They're on their phones, and they're not actors. I just found the progression is really, really cool to witness, see how they just adjust as we adjust to them. So
yeah, or they'll even get to the point where I've seen David do something and another player will like block a ball from hitting him, or they become like aware of him but not aware. Yeah, it's like you're just a part of the team. You're just there. It's like a thing that happens every day.
Especially practice. It's like, there's coaches that are just standing around. So it's like we kind of are like, they're just that extra element that's not a player, but they don't care after a while. They don't even.
Well, it's like a scene, their locker rooms. And in Oakland, the locker rooms are really cool. It's like natural light pouring in, all these cool, just soft light effects. And they're just naturally the way they were set in the building. And I'd always go in there and I know what time they were going to go. And they turn the lights on, they turn their music on, they put the projector on. And I just go in there, I just turn all the lights off because I want it looking, I know what Terry likes. So. And then, another player came in like, why are the lights off? He turned them on. I was like, David wants the lights off. So another one would slap the lights off. And, I'm in there every day. If Terry or Devin Hawk Weeks are not in there, I'm like, all right, Terry's here, Devin's here. I'm going to jump in and get some slow-mo, putting helmets on or find a guy, getting suited. And the locker room, you put 50 people in the locker room, it's you can't walk in there. And I'm a very small person compared to these football guys. And I still would go in there with the Segway. And then a couple of times I would notice, jerseys or clothes or pads in my path. And these guys were I think they're genius. They're like, most people just don't care. I'll move around it, but they would just, kick a pad over or move a shirt with their foot in their peripheral because they saw me coming. And it was the coolest thing.
I mean, they're very spatially aware as players. You know what I mean? That's what they do. Yeah. They're very aware.
Yeah.
What's going on?
So last question here, and I know someone asked it, and I was going to ask it anyway. For people who are maybe interested in getting into documentary filmmakers, whether they're students or already in the industry, but they're looking into getting to doc work, what are some advice that you would give them, moving forward to help hone their skills and to get them into the doc world?
Man, I don't know. I mean, right? Yeah, you got something. Go ahead.
I was going to say real quick from a technician's perspective, I think when I out of film school, if you had asked me like what's harder, like doc work or being on like the lead first on a feature, I probably would have said the feature, but I don't think that anymore. I think it takes a much better technician in a way to do this stuff at the same level doc work. So
yeah, you need to know your equipment. You need to be proficient in your equipment and have what you need so you don't miss anything. But I would say it's a great time to be, get into docs. I mean, it's with streaming, there's more, there's more outlet than there's ever been. But I would just say though, once you figure out your, as a documentarian, just find out your truth, figure out what it is that you want to tell, but be truthful, because if you're not, it will bite you later. You may do one or two projects that are a hit, but once people find out that, it was all fake or it was motivated in one way or the other, I think it slowly catches up to you, and I think it shows. And this is just me from learning, watching Greg through his progression of his career, but he's done such a good job of staying true, and that's how he gets this access, and he just won a bunch of Emmys, and he's on his way to just telling stories forever. So but it's because people trust him. I will say, in also with our style of documentary, especially Last Chance in sports, this is extremely physical. Now, this is just the camera side of it, but I don't think people understand how physical it is to shoot the way that we shoot. Yes, we're using big cameras, but even with a small camera, it doesn't matter. We're rolling, I don't know how many hours a day, all story stuff throughout the day. And then at practice, we're rolling for 2 hours. And then a game day, I start rolling 2 hours before the game starts. I don't finish for an hour after the game, and it's 5 hours. I mean, that means not putting the camera down at all. Maybe for five, I usually get 2 minutes at halftime to put it down and get a drink and kind of recoup for a second. Not saying it's the only way to make documentaries, but that's how this show is made. And I have a crew of people that can handle that, and it's tough. But that's if I get tired or we get tired and then we don't want to film something, that's how you miss, you miss the,
well,
you don't know what you're going to miss. You
gotta
have to persevere through that stuff. And
you got to love it. I think you got to, as a whole crew, everybody top down, you got to love what you're doing and what the project's about and who's involved, because that's, like you said, the days when it's 14 hours in or whatever, and it's raining and cold or whatever, and you still need to shoot. You just gotta love it.
And I can't do it without my crew, obviously. I mean, these guys support me at 100%.
But I think all of us, we do love it.
Right.
The fact that we're not there right now due to the change of everything. I'm going with a seasonal withdrawal, because I usually I'm Last Chance right now.
We're usually shooting right now.
Rolling around on my Segway. So yeah, I miss it. I miss it sincerely, and I think you have to, like Devin said, you have to love what you do, and I think everyone on crew does 100%.
And Gabe, earlier you also had a question. Somebody asked, "What's the hardest part of the show?" Which we're lucky because we love the show, and I think physicality of it is harder than most people would realize. For how long? 6 days a week for 13 weeks. Shooting 8 hours a day, camera on my shoulders or easy rig. But also, I think it's probably just us being away from home. It's tough to be in a hotel and away from family, especially people who are married, and have kids and stuff. There's a lot of sacrifice that the crew does to create the show. And again, I think if it wasn't for how good the show is and how the quality and how much people love it, I mean, I don't think people would keep coming back to do it. It's to live in a hotel for 13 weeks. But I think those are the two things that they ask what's hardest. I think that, and then just the beating on your body of actually accomplishing something like this.
Yeah, I think, and it's so amazing and I think it comes from the top down from Greg, but also from you, Terry, just being on set, that the attitude is all about getting what we need and making sure that we're getting what we need, but also the positivity that goes along with it. I remember I made friends with one of your camera operators or your first ACs, and he was a weekend guy for the games. And he said, man, he said, this is the best set I've ever worked on. And every week when I get a phone call to come work on this show, I'm so excited to come work on the show because these guys are so much fun to be around and they love what they're doing. And I think the passion and all that shows through all the way through when the audience is watching it through on Netflix. So, I mean, I personally know you guys, and I've had a relationship with you guys for several years, and I really think that you guys are some of the best in the business. From a rental house perspective, working at Able Cine, the communication that goes back and forth between us, Devin and me have so many conversations as to details and builds and cables and can we do this and can we streamline this and can we get this plate. And I tell you, all those things, if you're shooting and you're going to be renting gear or buying gear, communicating to the rental house what you need, what you want, getting the rental house involved in your project so that they understand your desires and goals, and having that relationship with the rental house, it's so huge. Whether that's Able or another house, it is such a big deal. And I tell you, you guys, in my opinion, you're some of my favorite people to ever work with from a rental house perspective. And you guys are you're at the top of the list. And I really appreciate your friendship and getting to work with you every single season. Season 6 has already aired. Maybe we'll get a season 7 of basketball coming up, or season 2 of basketball. And so I just want to thank you guys for joining us. I want to thank the audience for joining us. And any final words you guys may have at it. But I really appreciate your guys' friendship, and I really appreciate you guys, coming on the program today.
2 things. 1, thank you for putting up with my crazy gear list and asking for every little screw and every little thing I could possibly ask for, and always having it. And 2, I want to shout out to our sound department. One thing is Alex Abenshine and Nick Kelly and Christopher Flieger. I mean, our sound department is incredible. And on a doc, I think they're also some unsung heroes of our project. I mean, what they do is a whole nother
put together
level.
Is evidence.
They are.
If they weren't on top of their game, we would be, because eventually they slow everybody down. But I also want to say thank you, Gabe, and Able Cine. Again, as a rental house, you guys always, no matter what we need, whatever request, you guys figure it out or you get it for us. And I'm sure it's been said over and over, but a lot of rental houses, they don't have all the little stuff that makes our life easier, or they don't want to get it. A lot of places just say, I don't know, we're not going to buy that. We don't have that stuff. But you guys are always like, if you think that's going to make it better, we're going to get it, or we'll figure it out, or we have something similar. And you guys have always, there's no way we would make this show the way it is without you guys. So, thank you so much for always supporting us.
No, happy to.
Making it work.
Thank you guys for coming on. Terry, Devin, David, thank you so much. And I'm Gabriel Mays, and signing off for Creative Forces.
Later.
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 Bye.